Jillian, I'm kind of starting to miss football.
Well, don't you worry. Spring football starts next week.
And Sports Scene starts now. Welcome to this episode of Sports Scene. I'm Julia Adams.
And I'm Jillian Carroll. Spring football starts next week, and there is a lot to talk about.
USC football has added some big names to round out its 2020 season coaching staff.
Six coaches joined SC in the offseason in new positions. The lineup includes defensive coordinator and linebacker coach Todd Orlando, cornerback coach Dante Williams, defensive line coach Vic So'oto, tight end coach John David Baker, special teams coordinator Sean Snyder, and safety coach Craig Navarre. Taking a look at defensive coordinator Todd Orlando, he joins SC staff from Texas, where he was defensive coordinator for 3 seasons. In Texas's huge 37-14 win over the Trojans in 2018, Orlando led the Longhorns in shutting out USC's offense, holding the Trojans to -5 rushing yards.
I think if you want to be a good fighter, you got to get in fights. You know what I'm saying? So you got to practice that way. So that's going to start on Saturday. So not only are we trying to learn how to be physical and do those things, what you have to do, but just like a fighter, you got to be able to take punches too.
Orlando has 15 years of experience as a collegiate defensive coordinator, including at Houston, Utah State, Florida International, and Connecticut, along with Texas. At each of his stops, his aggressive blitzing defense has made an impact, especially at Texas, where his defense forced 65 turnovers, among the best in the Big 12. Orlando and defensive line coach Vic So'oto have a mindset for intensity. Jillian, do you think they will work together in upgrading the Trojans' offense?
I really think they will. Even though the former NFL linebacker is the least experienced addition to the Trojan staff, So'oto oversaw a Virginia defense that ranked number 7 in the nation for sacks last year. He will have a reserve of experienced players like Jay Tufele and Drake Jackson, and young guys to mold like early enrollee Kobe Pepe. So'oto wants the Trojans to be more physical.
And so the whole idea of, having violent practices and physical practices, it's not mine. It's just the way that I've known football from getting into college is every day is going to push you to the limit. Every day is going to take you to that dark point that, Orlando talks a lot about. And then we're going to see who can stay there. And really, that's where the championships are.
Quarterback coach Dante Williams come to USC from Oregon, where he was a quarterbacks coach for the past 2 seasons. The Ducks under Williams were second in the nation in interceptions in 2019 with 20. He was also named the nation's 7th best recruiter, number 1 in the Pac-12 for the class of 2020 by 24/7 Sports. Williams looks to develop his own legacy in recruiting at USC.
If you all of a sudden think that just because we're USC or just because this logo, someone's going to come here, you're wrong. Like I said, we're going to out-recruit other people. And by doing that, it has to be a 24-hour type of job, 7 days a week. And you have to be willing to do that.
The new coaches look to elevate the Trojans' defensive resume during spring ball, which starts next week.
Spring football starts March 10th, and joining us now to discuss Trojan football going into spring are football analysts Aiden Berg and Daniel Huynh. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
So SC has 6 coaches in new positions going into spring ball. Who do you think will have the biggest impact on the team?
Julia, do you know where the Trojans ranked nationally in total defense last season?
I do not, Daniel.
Number 78. It's inevitable that Todd Orlando is going to be the most important addition to this new coaching staff. We know this team can score points and touchdowns, but we all know that their defense has been kind of their Achilles heel for the last couple years. So however much this defense improves will determine how much this team wins.
Now, I'm going to disagree with you. I'm going to go for more of an off-field impact, and I'm going to say Dante Williams for his ability as a recruiter. Like Julia said, named one of the best recruiters in the entire nation and the best in the Pac-12. USC is lacking that juice on the recruiting trail, as we've seen with last year's class. So, his contributions as a recruiter, I think, is going to be the most crucial in terms of restoring USC to what it has previously been.
I'm sorry, Aiden, I'm going to have to go with Daniel on this one. I think Todd Orlando is going to be the most impactful in this new hire of coaches. And I think that because putting aside technical things, he's going to be able to change the mentality of this Trojan squad. He's going to make them more aggressive. They're going to want the ball. They're going to want to go after it instead of just waiting for the offense to come to them.
And with the addition of coaches like Todd Orlando, Vic So'oto, SC has invested a lot of time in the offseason cleaning up their defense. What still needs to be fixed during spring practice?
I'm going to go with the mindset of this defense, which is they don't have enough of a violent tendency. I think, like Coach Soto was saying in that presser, is they got pushed around too much last season, and that's not USC football. Teams are supposed to be afraid when they come into the Coliseum. They're supposed to be afraid when the Trojans come on the road to play them in their stadium. So, but that just hasn't been the case, really, because the Trojans get pushed around too much. So fixing that, especially on the defensive line, is going to be very important.
Well, Aiden, I think technique is just as also as more as mindset. Specifically, I think this team needs to improve on the pass rush, mainly because all the reasons why the team was 78 last year nationally was because they couldn't simply tackle. I think if they could fix that, I think their defense could be much improved.
I think it's just it starts with mindset, really. The coaching staff sets the mindset for the team, and that's where it all kind of begins, and that's where you kind of get to the technique standpoint. But unless you have that aggression and that kind of violent tendency, you're not going to get to the point where you can fix up that technique and really bring that to the table.
Well, I'm going to look at the other side of the ball. I really want to see some more stuff happening on our offense. I think the run game can be addressed. I want to see it bolstered. I want to see more run game. I want to see running backs like Stephen Carr out there on the field.
Yeah, exactly. And spring football starts March 10th. What do you want to see out of spring football? You kind of touched on the run game, but what about you guys?
I mean, I can't really reiterate enough. Defense. Again, we know this team can score touchdowns. It's up to the defense to relieve the pressure off of quarterback Keaton Slovis. And then if they could do that, I think the Trojans can see more wins this season.
I see, Daniel, I don't really know what you're expecting from the defense, to be quite honest, because they're under a new staff. It's going to take time for them to kind of develop and get used to the new coaching mannerisms that they're going to be adjusting to. So what I'm looking for is for the offense in another season under Graham Harrell, knowing who their quarterback is probably going to be in Keaton Slovis, having all of those playmakers returning to their team, even with the loss of Michael Pittman Jr., albeit he's a very big loss. Yeah. But the offense needs to dominate in spring ball because the defense is just falling behind.
But Aiden, this defense has been it's the Achilles heel of this team. This team has not ranked nationally in total team tackles. This team doesn't really need offense right now. This team needs defense. It needs to get the opposing offenses off the field. This defense needs to support quarterback Keaton Slovis.
Jillian, who do you agree with?
Well, I'm going to put the technical side again. I want to see the connection that these players are going to have with each other and with these coaches that are coming in new to SC, and also some of the coaches that are new to their positions.
Well, thanks for joining us, Aiden and Daniel. Well, we'll have full coverage of spring football on Twitter and Instagram at Ann Media Sports. And football may just be getting started, but men's basketball is heating up. The Trojans wrap up regular conference play this Saturday in a rivalry matchup against UCLA. The matchup against UCLA will be a big one. The Bruins are on the 7-game win streak, and the game will decide USC's Pac-12 seeding.
The key to beating the Bruins will be to play a clean ball game. The Trojans were still making turnover errors last weekend in their win over ASU. After allowing a season-high 24 turnovers in their February 8th meeting against the Sun Devils, the Trojans struggled to take care of the ball again on Saturday, giving up 19 turnovers to ASU. The head coach, Andy Enfield, has faith in the Trojan team.
Their best basketball is ahead of us, ahead of them. And at times this year, Jonah was streaky. Now, Jonah's playing great right now, and Utomi was streaky. And so Elijah Weaver's been streaky. So we've been winning by committee. The fact that we have 21 wins right now is a testament to our defense and our toughness.
Tournament hopes. ESPN bracketologist Joe Lunardi projects USC as an 11th seed against Oklahoma in the March Madness tournament that starts on the 17th.
Joining us for Roundtable Round 2 are basketball analysts Tyler Mayerly and Reagan Griffin Jr. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, huge.
So SC has a big rivalry matchup Saturday against UCLA. How can the Trojans get a win against the Bruins, who are number 1 in the Pac-12 right now?
I've said this before, and I'll say it again. It comes down to defending these guards, right? On the back end of this season, USC's had to face some really, really talented guards. Last week, they held up pretty well against Nico Mannion, but it's going to come down to stopping Chris Smith and Tiger Campbell. These guys have been really leading the resurgence for UCLA in this back end of the season. I think it's going to come down to Jonah Matthews and Ethan Anderson again, having to step up defensively and containing them as best as they can.
This might sound simple, but keep doing what they're doing without the little careless mistakes. USC right now sits at 13-2 at home. They're a great team at home. They've already beat UCLA once on the road this season. They just have to lock it down one more time.
And I think they're just going to have to focus on not turning over the ball. I mean, 19 turnovers in ASU, that's something that fans and us alike do not want to see in that game against UCLA, and they're going to need to control that in order to get the win.
And you mentioned that they beat UCLA earlier. I think it's important that we acknowledge the fact that this is a different UCLA team.
Is.
They have done a lot better since the first
They're
time they
on
played.
top right now, number one.
No doubt about it.
Yeah. SC has had a rather inconsistent season, going 13-2 at home, like you mentioned, Tyler, and 4-6 on the road. What has been the Trojans' biggest struggle?
I back to what Jillian said, those turnovers. 19 in the game against ASU, but that's consistently been an issue. They started off the season high, close to almost 20 turnovers a game, and then it maybe got better, but never less than 10 a game. That's one thing. When I mentioned careless mistakes, a lot of those turnovers should have never happened.
No doubt, and those offensive possessions are important. What's also important is what you do with those offensive possessions, and what USC has been lacking is shooting. And when you lack shooting, that doesn't give Onyeka the space that he needs to operate to his full potential. So they've been really fluctuating up and down throughout the course of the season, but they need to stay at least at the very least 33% range to be viable throughout the Pac-12 tournament and hopefully the March Madness tournament. The shooting has definitely got to be an issue that's fixed.
We heard Enfield talk about streaky players. Daniel Otome, one of those, but he's also a great player when he can make those shots.
Exactly.
And just kind of bringing together what all of us are saying, I think it's the focus. When they play poorly, they spiral, and the focus is just completely gone within themselves and between each other. So that's something they're going to have to hone in on.
No doubt.
Saturday's the matchup against UCLA, then following that, Pac-12 play against. How can USC end as a top 4 seed?
They're going to need some help. It starts first and foremost with beating UCLA come this Saturday, but beyond that, they're going to need Colorado to lose to Utah, or they're going to need Arizona State to lose twice against both Washington teams. So it starts first and foremost with beating UCLA, and that's what this team needs to be focused on is, the things that they can control, but they're going to need some things beyond their control, some help from the other Pac-12 teams to really have a shot at that first round bye.
Exactly. They're hanging on by a thread. They need to beat UCLA. I don't see that being an issue. Colorado needs to lose to Utah. ASU's most likely going to still be up there, but you never know. If they, for some reason, lose to both Washington teams, USC's definitely a lock in top 4. That would get them a first round bye.
I will say, I almost wonder if you don't want this team to have a first round bye, because we've seen this team come back from extended breaks and play a little bit lackadaisically, and I think it's important for a team to get within its rhythm and stay in game mode. And if you take those extended breaks, it could serve as a negative, although it's it's meant to serve as a positive. It could be to your detriment when it's time to play those games against teams that have already been playing. So I think this team would benefit from actually not placing in the top 4 and having to go in, warm up against a lesser team, and having an opportunity to stay warm.
What scares me about that, Reagan, is just that they have to play a first round game and they end up losing a game that they shouldn't have to lose.
Where's your optimism?
I know, but they shouldn't have lost to ASU when they were there in Arizona, and they did anyway, so that worries me.
That's true.
I just really think they're going to have to be consistent. I mean, they need this win against UCLA to be hopeful throughout the rest of the tournament and to secure that number 4 seed, and they're going to have to continue to be consistent throughout the rest of the tournament.
That's one thing we can all agree on. It starts on Saturday, regardless of what happens.
Yes.
It'll be exciting.
Well, thanks for your input, Reagan, Tyler. For some women's basketball news, the women of Troy start Pac-12 tournament play this Thursday in Las Vegas.
USC's women's basketball finished up their regular season with a 16-3 record and captured the number 7 seed for the Pac-12 tournament. Freshman forward Alyssa Peely was named Pac-12 Freshman of the Year after a dominant performance this season.
Peely got her 4th Pac-12 Freshman of the Week after huge efforts this weekend. She had 29 points against Utah and 20 against Colorado. Peely ran a double-digit streak out to 14 straight games and has 11 double-doubles on the season. She will be a huge playmaker for the Trojans in the Pac-12 tournament.
The women of Troy will take on the Colorado Buffaloes tomorrow to fight for a spot in the Pac-12 quarterfinals. The game will be broadcast live on the Pac-12 network.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Sports Scene. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Annenberg Media Sports. I'm Julia Adams.
And I'm Jillian Carroll. We'll see you next week.